There was nothing else at all in the whole world but football.
Hi and welcome to the Triple F for another episode of The Magic Of, where we profile wonderful football clubs from all over the world. This episode we'll be looking at Bury FC, we'll cover a little about the town of Bury, look at the rich history of Bury FC, explore as to why the club fell into liquidation in 2019, and revel in the ambitious morale-boosting Phoenix Club project, Bury AFC. I'll then be joined by lifelong Bury fan and writer of Bury FC fanzine, The Hatchet, Chris Bainbridge, to chat all things Bury. I hope you all enjoy the magic of Bury. Bury is a large market town in Greater Manchester, England. The name Bury derives from the Anglo-Saxon word burg, or bur, meaning stronghold. From the 14th century, Bury had become renowned for its involvement in the woolen industry until cotton had risen to more of an economical prominence in the 18th century. From the 19th century, Bury's most renowned exports had expanded to bleaching and calico printing. To this day, the most popular forms of industry within the town are papermaking, metalworking and light industry. Other historical milestones include the reign of the Pilkington family throughout the War of the Roses, its establishment as the regimental town of the Lancashire Fusiliers, and along with Stornoway in Scotland, Bury is renowned for its black pudding. Butchers within Bury have been manufacturing and distributing black pudding since 1810. The town's most famous landmarks include Bury Art Museum, which houses works by J.M.W. Turner and John Constable. Bury Castle is a 13th century fortified manor house. Bury Market, Bury's world-famous market, was established 600 years ago and has been in use to this very day. It was voted British Market of the Year in 2006 by the National Association of British Market Authorities, and BBC Radio 4 voted it Food and Farming Awards Market of the Year in 2010. Bury Football Club was founded in 1885 following the merger of two church teams, Bury Wesleyans and Bury Unitarians. The club leased a plot of land on the Earl of Derby's estate and established the stadium Gig Lane as their new home. In 1892, the use of their famous nickname was born. Bury FC chairman J.T. Ingham reportedly fired up his players by saying, "We shall shake 'em, in fact, we are the Shakers." The club has been known as the Shakers ever since. Bury gained entry to the English Football League in 1894 and won promotion from the second division to the first division in their first ever season in professional football. In 1900, Bury won the FA Cup. They did so by winning every game away from home and beat Southampton 4-0 in the final. Unbelievably, their FA Cup triumph in 1903 was even more impressive. They didn't concede a single goal en route to the final, and their 6-0 demolition of Derby County stood as the biggest winning margin in an FA Cup final until 2019, when Man City matched it with their win against Watford. Ever since they won promotion in 1894, they spent 17 years in the top flight until they were relegated in 1912. They returned to the first division in 1924, spent 5 years there and achieved the highest ever league position, finishing 4th in the 1925-26 season. Unfortunately, their relegation in 1929 was the last time the club would ever feature in the top division of English football. They slid even further after being relegated to the 3rd Division North in 1957. However, an exciting team was being built. A young Bury team found their way back into the 2nd Division after they were crowned champions of the newly amalgamated 3rd Division in the 1960-61 season. They reached the semi-final of the English League Cup in 1963, only to be edged out of the competition 4-3 by eventual winners Birmingham City. It was in 1963 where, arguably one of the best players to don a Bury shirt, Colin Bell, came onto the scene. Having spent 30 years flittering between the third and fourth tiers of English football, manager Stan Ternan guided Bury into the First Division with back-to-back promotions in 96 and 97. In 2005, Bury became the first, and so far only, club to score 1,000 goals in each tier of English football. In 2012, the club's crippling financial difficulties began to surface when they were placed under a transfer embargo because of poor attendance figures. Despite former chairman Stuart Day attempting to alleviate the debt of the club in 2013, sporting director Lee Dykes organising a youth development strategy in 2018, and the team producing decent performances and results on the pitch, Bury FC's financial issues off the pitch weighed heavy on the club. Businessman Steve Dale became owner of Bury FC after he bought the club for £1 in 2018. As a result of Dale failing to pay his staff, the EFL allowing an owner to purchase a club of whom should never have passed the fit and proper persons test, considering 43 of Dale's 51 companies had been liquidated, the EFL, seemingly only providing disciplinary action opposed to supporting the club, failed company voluntary arrangement schemes and failed winding up petitions, previous regimes excessively overspending and failed takeover bids, sadly, Bury FC were expelled from the English Football League in August 2019. As Victor Hugo once said, even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. You could argue the sun began to rise for Bury when the Phoenix club Bury AFC was formed in December 2019. Currently plying their trade in the North West Counties Football League Division 1 North, Bury AFC is fan-owned with a one-member, one-vote policy. Whether Bury AFC can reach the levels set by their previous incarnation remains to be seen. But for now, the pride, the impetus and the focus is driving the club forward with the synchronised message, by the fans, for the fans. If you're enjoying the magic of, then you might enjoy our other podcasts. The Triple F Show is jam-packed with general football discussion. Under the Floodlights invites fans to talk about their favourite players and managers. And the Triple F Cinema is where guests and I review weird and wacky football films. Right guys, now for my chat with lifelong Bury fan and writer of the Bury FC fanzine, The Hatchet, Chris Bainbridge. Why Bury?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let me go back to the beginning of when I started supporting Bury, and it was the 1960s, late 1960s, and I was born in Newcastle. I'm a Geordie, as you can tell by my accent. Obviously, I don't use it for everyday purposes, just when, you know, I get together with family and visit the old country, as it were, back up in Tyneside. And we moved as a family in 1967 down to North Manchester. Employment, my father's employment, you know, there wasn't a great deal of work up there. And we moved to Greater Manchester, well, as it is now, but, you know, Lancashire. I'm just on the northern outskirts of Manchester, a place called Prestwich. Had a very happy upbringing there and teenage years and all the rest of it. But I was 8 years old and I was just getting into football. It was just at that age where I was getting an interest in football. And I actually understood it when it was on the telly. I realised it wasn't a race and why they all changed direction. You know, there's a ball involved apparently. So I was getting into it, and I realised that I had to support Newcastle. I had to support Newcastle United, the lads. You know, basically because everyone where I lived supported Newcastle, and my father supported Newcastle, and my uncles. Well, on my father's side, supported Newcastle. On my mother's side, my uncle supported Sunderland, right. And he took my first ever football league match, which was at Roker Park, and I think this must have stuck in the old fella's craw a bit, and a fortnight later he took me to St James's, so try and lead me into the path of righteousness or frustration, whichever way you want to look at it. Anyway, I was just getting into it, and in 1967, lo and behold, we moved, and when I moved down to Prestwich, everybody supported United or City, Manchester United or Manchester City. They were famous, big clubs, both in the First Division, as it was then. United were on their way to the European Cup final the following year, although we didn't know it at the time. and it was just split kind of down the middle. And the kids used to say to me in the playground or wherever, "Who do you support? Who do you stick up for?" Was the phrase. Who do you stick up for? United or City? And I thought, well, I can't in all conscience support either of those two because they're in the same division as Newcastle. So I thought, I don't know. Well, I thought, well, I like them both, and that didn't go down well. So instead of pleasing both sides didn't like me then. They thought, oh yeah, who's this spy or whatever? But I did genuinely like both teams. And me and my dad, God bless him, he did take me to Main Road and Old Trafford a couple of times to see matches, just to see if there was a particular one that I preferred. And I did actually prefer Main Road, and it was more to do with the ground and the matchday experience than the actual team, because both teams were very, very good. But I just had a better time at Main Road. It seemed more homely, more down to earth, a little bit rougher, I suppose, really. But anyway, yeah, after a couple of years of this, and don't get me wrong, we weren't going every other week to watch the Manchester club. I was still supporting Newcastle when we could. We would go and see them at Main Road. We'd go up to Burnley at Turf Moor and see them up there. So I'd see Newcastle occasionally, and the occasional trip back up home and see them. And then one particular day, I thought, well, I've heard of this team called Bury, and it's just up the road. And I know they're in a smaller division. I'd never considered anything beyond the first division, or perhaps maybe the upper reaches of the second division. Who's going to get promoted? That kind of thing. But I thought, well, Bury can't be that far because the main road going through Prestwich is called Bury New Road, and I thought, well, it can't be that far. And it wasn't. It's only about 5 or 6 miles. And we got a couple of buses, went up to Gig Lane one day, me and my dad, took a couple of my classmates from school, and we saw a fantastic game. Crowd was only about 5,000 or 6,000. It was a third round cup tie. We lost, but the atmosphere was great. It was just very easygoing and close to the pitch, and you could change ends at half time. That was a big difference for me. I'd never known anything like it. Just walk around and suddenly you're behind the right goal again. So I like that. I like that very much. And I then began to say to people, who do you support? I would say Bury, and then they'd all fall about laughing. And apart from one or two, you would find there'd be maybe one in each class. And I found this as I moved into secondary school as well. There'd be one or two in each year group who would kind of nod, kind of sagely, and kind of you'd make contact. You know what I mean? You'd found the other misfits. And it was a kind of a nice thing. And especially, I think I'm jumping forward a couple of years now, when you move into your teenage years, there's a strange kind of paradoxical fellowship of being a misfit. We know this in teenage culture very well, don't we? But yeah, that fitted me. That suited me down to the ground, really. And I saw some good football. Early on, we saw some, as I've said, the first match I saw was a defeat against Barnsley. I saw a couple of good league matches where we won by the odd goal. I saw one where we beat, I think, Tranmere about 8-1 or something. It was just ridiculous kind of games like that. But then one day in a league match in the third division, we played Aston Villa. And Villa were at the top of the league and about to be promoted. And they were featuring in the League Cup final the following weekend. But they came to Bury, who were fighting against relegation, as often seems to be the case, and Bury slaughtered them. I mean, we just absolutely wasted them. 3-1, fantastic game, big crowd for us, really big crowd. And it was on the Sunday match on ITV. So it was kind of like fame at last. You can still find it now on YouTube. It's really good. Yeah, so that kind of cemented it. Even though we were relegated that season, 1970, something like that, 71-ish. Something 70, I think. And in fact, that was the first year that Bury ever ended up in the bottom division. Up until then, they'd been no lower than third division. But that season, they got relegated. But in the closing weeks, we beat Aston Villa, who got promoted, and we also beat Fulham, who got promoted.
Oh,
it's just one of those. It's football, isn't it? Football.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was. I kind of went on strike from the relegation onwards. I thought, well, I'm not watching Division 4. No. come back when you're better, you know. Anyway, in 1973, well, actually, I'll go back a bit further. In 1972, spring of 72, Bury were drawn against Manchester City in the League Cup. It was a night match. I didn't go because I was like, you know, I wasn't bothered at that point. But a lot of my friends at school went, and Bury won 2-0, knocked City out of the cup.
Oh, wow.
And with it being local rivals as well, and one of the teams where most of the people in your school were fans of that team or Manchester United. The following day at school, I had never seen so many Bury supporters. It was incredible. People had suddenly just decided that they were Bury fans. something was astir in the early 70s. And by the start of the 73 season, I thought, I'll give them another try. And I went along to the first home match of the season. I was surprised to bump into quite a lot of other lads from my year at school who obviously decided they were now Bury fans as well. And it was a great game, September, you know, August kind of thing, sunny day. The ground looked immaculate. It was a very old ramshackle ground, but it had all been painted and everything. The grass was superb. Just one of those things that makes you fall in love with football.
Yeah.
As I did all over again. And the result was right. We beat Chester 3 or 4-0 and had a fantastic season, ended up being promoted with a wonderful, wonderful team with like kind of 2 good wingers and central strikers, and it was just very attacking football, and that confirmed me, as it were. That was my confirmation. the promotion season of 73-74.
Oh, brilliant. And the fans were coming out of the woodwork then at that point, then, were they?
Well, they were. I would like to say so. I think they were coming out of the woodwork more than they had been in the late 1960s, let's put it that way. There was certainly a bit of momentum happening. There was a bit of a buzz around the town, and even where I lived, you know, Prestwich, which was pretty much North Manchester, there were more people there in Prestwich and Whitefield and Haywood and surrounding towns who were kind of saying, yeah, Bury, yeah, we support Bury. So it was kind of going, there was a bit of a rush, really, a bit of a surge. And it was just good fun, good fun.
So, I mean, could you sort of tell us about your involvement with Bury and what it is that you sort of do for the club and so on?
What the club as it is now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the club as it is now, but what you've done for Bury FC in the past as well.
Yeah, in the past. Well, I've always been kind of a writer, really, and I've always inhabited this world where you write things and you make up alternative possibilities. And I think many football fans are dreamers, aren't they, at heart? And particularly lower division, or even if you're in the top divisions and you don't win all the time, you tend to be a bit creative, a bit imaginative. It's the best way to get through, isn't it? And,
I'm an Arsenal fan, so I know all about that.
Exactly, dreaming about what could be, and what should be, and what maybe could. So there's a kind of romance attached to that, an unreality, as it were. So I kind of kept on watching Bury throughout my teenage years. A couple more relegations, a couple more promotions, and then by the fast forward to the mid-90s, I would say, and we were in the bottom division again, and we'd done quite well this season. 1995, we actually got to the playoff finals, and the playoffs were a relatively new invention back in those days. And Bury had won through to the final in 1995, and it was at Wembley, the final. And we all thought, we're going to go to Wembley and we're going to win and we're going to get promoted. And we didn't. But interestingly, it was the first time a Bury team had ever played at Wembley, even though they'd actually won the FA Cup on 2 previous occasions. It was so far back in the past that the times Bury had actually won the FA Cup, the finals were played at Crystal Palace. So it's kind of like ancient history. Yeah. And I'll just digress if I may a little bit. Then I go back to the 70s. We had an elderly relative living with us at that time. He was kind of like on his last legs. He would have been my grandparents' generation. Let's put it that way. Old northeastern fella called Peter. My great uncle Peter. And he'd been around the world on ships and stuff like that. And he quite liked football. He'd been a Sunderland supporter in his day. And I would go off to the match on a Saturday, and he would ask me how they got on when I came back. And but they any good? Yes, they were good. And he would say to me things that mystified me at the time. He said, "Aye, they used to be good. They used to be good. Bury." You know, they say it like that in the North. Bury, they used to be good. And I'm going, yeah, I believe, because I didn't know this. I believe they used to be in the second division. He said, nah, buddy lad. When they were in the fourth division, they always beat Sunderland. And I'm like, this was amazing to me. This was like mind-blowing. Bury have never been above the second division, surely. But indeed they had. And this old fella, he remembered it. So that kind of gave me an eye-opener, really. And it's a theme that recurs to me quite a lot with Bury FC, is that I think a lot of younger people don't have an awareness of what a force they were in football long before our time, of course, back in grandparents and great-grandparents' days. We grew up with this identity of being a lower division club and a label of being Little Bury or whatever, or that kind of thing. And we were never kind of encouraged by anyone, certainly not the media or the people who supported other teams around us, to kind of look any further than that, to kind of put your head up from the parapet a bit and go, well, it could be different. Things could be, you know how close we came to getting back into the top flight in 1963? Well, no, I didn't, because no one's ever told me. That kind of thing. So I kind of tried to make it not a personal mission, but I thought every chance I get, I'm going to tell people about the stuff I've found out. Anyway, back to 1995, we lost the playoff final. It was very, very bitterly disappointing. The team just didn't kind of turn up on the day. They got beaten by Chesterfield 2-0. Wasn't a great match, but it was a big turnout. You know, it was like hundreds of coaches went down there, and my two sons, my two eldest children, were on the coach with me, and their mother, and the long day and a much longer journey back, obviously, after you've been beaten. And I'll never forget, as the coach turned into Gig Lane, which is near where we lived anyway at the time, having done hundreds of miles that day, and the kids have been great. The eldest, Michael, must have been, he'd have been 6 or 7. Let's see. Yeah, and he'd come all that way. And we got into hundreds of miles. We got into Gig Lane, the last 200 yards, and as the coach turned the corner, he promptly threw up on the coach. We've done so well up to now. Anyway, poor lad. We got the old mop and bucket out and everything. Anyway, we got back home, and I thought this is very frustrating. We'd had quite a good season, which ended in disappointment. And during the summer, there was a kind of determination not to let that slide. There were good noises coming out of the club. Let's have another bash. We'll go up next time. Automatic promotion. That's the way to do it. We're obviously not good at this playoff thing. Let's do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And in the summer, I started writing little articles, little kind of essays or one-page items. Thinking, I'll send those off to one of the fanzines, or I'll send something to When Saturday Comes. You know, that was a big thing at the time. You know.
Yeah.
I was an avid reader of When Saturday Comes. And we had a fanzine in Bury at the time called Where Were You at the Shay, which was a very good fanzine. And I knew one or two of the people involved in it. So I thought, well, I can always send stuff to them. And I did send a couple of things, and they never got in. And I thought, what's wrong with that then? I'm sure it's quite a good article. Anyway, it could well be something as simple as the person that I sent it to had moved house. You know, it was in a day of sending things in an envelope with a stamp on it. None of this emailing stuff like that. Anyway, during the summer, I thought, let's get writing. I ended up writing about 6 pieces. And then I thought, well, if I write another 6 and cut the page size down and fold it in half, I've got a fanzine of my own. And that's exactly what happened. And at the start of the 95-96 season, I launched my own fanzine, which I called the Hatchet, because I thought it looked good in the back index pages of When Saturday Comes, where they listed the team names and then the name of the fanzine right next to it. And I just thought Bury, the Hatchet, would look good.
Brilliant.
That's why. Also, I like the idea of, the small axe thing. You know, if you're a big tree, we are the small axe. You know, we'll they'll come and chop you down. You know? So that's from the old reggae culture, isn't it? Music and everything. So there's lots of stuff like that, lots of little in jokes that I put in. It's quite sad, really, because when you're a committee of one, there's a chance that nobody else is going to actually get these jokes. But anyone watching this now, you've no excuse. You know what it's all about. The good thing was for the club in '96 onwards for the next 2 or 3 years, and for me personally, and for the fanzine, is that we became associated with unprecedented success. Bury got promoted in '96. They then got immediately promoted again, back-to-back promotions. In '97, they went up as champions into Tier 2, what was then called, was it called Division 1 then? Division 2? Anyway, it was the second tier.
Mm-hmm.
What's now called the Championship. So this was amazing. We just couldn't believe this had happened. And the fanzine was there every few weeks just to kind of chronicle that, really. And it was just an amazing journey. And anyone who was there at the time, who was a Bury supporter and going to matches, will tell you it was just unreal.
And how popular was the fanzine then? Did you get a lot of positive feedback from it and
We've
everything?
got loads of positive feedback, I'm glad to say. And it was done very much on a shoestring. And all I wanted to do was cover printing costs. And we did all sorts of things to get it printed. We had some real adventures. It could be a story in itself. I started off using the local council's reprographics unit, where they printed all the materials for classwork and coursework, because I knew somebody, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But to be fair, the quality was great, and they were dirt cheap. So the first issue only had 80 copies, which we sold out very rapidly. So the following issue, we kind of doubled it. We went to 160. We were never a huge print run. We were never going to be a huge print run because the fan base is quite small. It's not like you had some of your Man United and other teams with their fanzines who are selling 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 copies per issue. It was never going to be a full-time job or anything like that, you know, unfortunately. But yeah, it was good fun. So we used the reprographics unit at the local council. You know, we paid for it. Now it wasn't a foreigner. I wouldn't rip off the local council taxpayers, of course not. There was one time when I was really desperate, and this was a sign of my own incompetence, really, or, you know, trying to avoid deadlines. And suddenly you get to the point where it's a deadline and you've got your copy ready far too late and you need it next morning. There was one or two that I actually had printed by Pronto Print. Now that was just ludicrously expensive. A good job, for no argument with that. Really good quality, nice color and all the rest of it. But just about covered costs. That was it. Just about managed to do it. And you would do things like that. I would do something like that out of desperation because I'd left my deadline too late. Oh, somebody started helping me with it, and they said, "Oh, do you know what? I work part-time for one of the MPs in Salford, and I've got the keys to the office. Why don't we print an issue on his photocopier one day?" So we did that. So that was quite good fun. So we're letting ourselves into the MP's office.
Nice.
You know, in the dead of night, you know. I hope I'm not laying myself open to any kind of criminal proceedings here, but we didn't do any damage, I don't think. We just printed the fanzine, really. It's quite good fun.
Excellent.
We did get good feedback. We had you can't beat the word on the street, and when people would see us for the second time and subsequent times would say, "Oh, great, well done, really liked it. Yeah, get one," or "Get two, because Jim will have one," you know, that kind of thing. And we would get bits of interest. We get letters coming in from different parts of the country, and I had contact letters and phone calls and things from people at things like Match of the Day magazine, 442. Obviously, I was still in touch with When Saturday Comes, and they occasionally were asking me to write little pieces for them, which they still do. God bless them. So that's lovely to still have that contact after what we have to say now is all these years.
If you're interested in coming on the show for an Under the Floodlights special to talk about your favourite player or manager, please email the triplef2021@gmail.com or DM the triplef84 on Twitter. All contact details will be in the episode description. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.
What would you consider Bury's greatest achievements throughout their long history? Bury FC, that is.
Bury FC, yeah, throughout their history. I think people often point to the FA Cup wins, which were phenomenal, let's face it. To win the FA Cup was something special. And to win it in the style they did, with no goals conceded in the final. They won the first one 4-0.
Mm-hmm.
The second time, that was 1900. In 1903, they won it 6-0, which remained a record until Manchester City scored 6 in the final a couple of seasons ago. However, as any Bury fan will tell you, the Bury final score remains the best because it was actually we actually didn't concede any goals in any of the rounds leading up to that.
Nice.
Leading up to that final. Whereas Manchester City actually shipped 2 goals against Newport County on their way to their fantastic success. So really, Bury still rule with that one. So those are 2 great achievements. I think before that, if you want to look back even further, obviously before times any of us were around, was when they were first elected to the Football League in 1894, I think it was, into the then second division. They were promoted at the first attempt. And that was really quite an achievement, I think. But throughout history, there've been some good achievements. When they got promoted again back to the top flight in 24, I believe that was a fantastic team. Really good attacking football. Some famous names from before our time. In my lifetime, well, before my lifetime, in my lifetime, but I was only a toddler. They got promoted from the 3rd tier to the 2nd tier in 1961 as champions, and that apparently was a brilliant team as well. Very good. Very hard to find any archive footage from those days, of course, but there's the odd bit knocking about. 63 was a season where they could and perhaps should have been promoted back to the top flight and missed out. It was the big freeze in 63. Apparently the whole country was snowbound for about 3 months, and lots of fixtures piled up, and there were some key injuries to our players at the time. And when they came back after the shutdown in March, and had a lot of matches to play, they kind of fell away a bit and missed out on promotion. And they've never been as close since, to be honest. They've never been that close since. And in fact, as we all know now, have gone even further the other direction. But some great teams. There was a good team in 67, 68 that got promoted for the second tier again. And the 96 team and 97 team, fantastic. To my mind, and to a lot of people who were there watching Bury at the time, the team having won promotion to the second tier in 1997, perhaps their biggest achievement was actually staying up the following year with some really good sides in that division, and some very well financed teams as well, some very wealthy clubs, very well supported and well established clubs. We were like upstarts really, and hadn't had the tradition or the time at that level to build a big enough fan base, I don't think, really. So to have stayed up by the skin of our teeth, perhaps, for that extra season, that was a massive achievement. And in that season, we had some great results, particularly from February onwards, when we were cast adrift at the foot of the table and looking like going down, odds on to go down. And we turned it around in a very symbolic match. It was away at Main Road at City. We were in the same division, and we beat City 1-0. Fantastic day out for us. Not such a good day for the City fans, obviously. For them, that was kind of like the final proof that there was something seriously wrong at Main Road at Manchester City. It was like, well, if Bury can come and do that to us, heads must roll. And indeed they did. Which we thought was a little bit patronising, really. We weren't that bad. We did well on the day. It was a good game. We deserved to win.
Yeah.
Having said that, to look at it from a Manchester City point of view, it must have been bloody grim, awful. Famously, one thing we really enjoyed a lot was during the match, one of the City fans ran out of the Kipax stand during the second half, I think it was, stood in the centre circle and ripped his season ticket up on the pitch before being carted off.
Bloody hell.
So, such was the depth of feeling. But that kind of turned it around, and symbolically it was a big boost for our team as well. The players all worked hard, and we had some stunning results from then to the end of the season. We won away at Birmingham City later that season. Final game of the season, we beat QPR at Loftus Road to clinch survival. So there were some good performances that year, as well as some disappointing ones, of course. But that was a great achievement.
Excellent. Just out of personal interest, I'm wondering if Bury ever crossed swords with my local team when I was a kid, Rushden Diamonds.
I'm sure we may have done. I don't think it happened very often.
No.
Because Rushden were quite a new addition to the league, weren't they?
Yeah,
and
sort of
sadly didn't last
90s.
long either.
No, there's a similar sort of story there, isn't there, with Bury? Yeah.
All to do with ownership and that kind of stuff, isn't it? And I know the little I know about Rushden interested me quite a lot, because they were actually an amalgamation, weren't they, of Rushden Town and Earthingborough Diamonds.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Both in Northamptonshire, of course, and I think that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah,
anyway,
Northamptonshire.
Yeah.
But
quite sad, really.
Yeah, for one of the saddest parts of the story is the fact that Kettering Town, who were their local and heated rivals, ended up playing in Nen Park, their ground, because Kettering Town were having financial troubles, but they thought, hey, why not move into Rushden Diamonds ground? I mean, that must have been. And I remember,
stick in the throat, really.
It was awful. Can you imagine that?
That's
that's like
every
Spurs moving into the Emirates or something.
Exactly.
Or Liverpool moving into Old Trafford. Can you imagine? It's like,
can you imagine?
Yeah,
man. Well, do you know what? After the couple of years we've had, I can imagine almost anything. Let's face it. And we should have seen this coming in some respects. Once Wimbledon were booted off to Milton Keynes, that kind of made me start to think, well, all bets are off really here. Anything's up for grabs.
No one's safe, really, eh?
Nobody is safe. And Bury, for me, have always been one of those clubs that have been more vulnerable than others for a number of reasons: demographic, population-wise, the closeness of big city rivals, all kinds of reasons. And we've been vulnerable. And in the end, we kind of diced with death once too often. And I'm not saying it's our fault. This is not a blame the victim scenario, far from it. But we were just too vulnerable. We attracted the wrong kind of attention. That's as diplomatically as I'll put it for now. I'll get less diplomatic as we go through, obviously.
I've got it sort of later to have on the list, but let's just get into it now. I mean, obviously, it's not an easy task, but I mean, if you could, as best as you can, explain what sort of led to the expulsion of Bury from the EFL.
It's a difficult one to answer. We can trace it back not to the current owner of Bury FC Limited, who still exist. Legally still exist. They're not a football club, but they're a company. It's a moribund company. It's not doing anything. The current owner of that was the owner who presided, or was actually there in place when Bury FC was expelled from the EFL. And he turns out to have been a thoroughly bad egg, basically. Let's put it kindly. I don't know why he got involved. The suspicions are that he maybe saw a development opportunity, get his hands on the club and the real estate perhaps, and be able to build on the ground. These are the suspicions. Self-confessed, he said, I didn't know Bury had a team. I don't like football. These are all the kind of things that football supporters absolutely do not want to hear. The fact that he bought the company for £1 made people think, well, why him? Why couldn't you sell it to the Supporters Trust for £1? Why couldn't you? What's going on? And that then kind of made some people ask questions about the previous owner. Right. I mean, people had asked questions about him anyway. We'll get into that. But it's kind of like, well, why would you sell to this person for £1? Why is he your favoured bidder? They wasn't even a bidder. He said, yeah, I'll buy it. Here's £1. Why was that? Was there some kind of collusion going on? This is bound to be a question that people.
And how was that sanctioned as well?
Well, this is the other villain of the piece, which is the EFL, really.
Yeah.
To be honest.
What's the fit and proper test there for?
Fit and proper test, means nothing. Meant nothing to us.
Yeah.
Meant less than nothing, really. And But the previous guy, he'd come in 5 years or so earlier with big promises, big dreams, big talk. Oh, I've got a 5-year plan. We'll be in the championship within 5 years. Spent ludicrous amounts of money on wages and transfer fees for players who sometimes maybe weren't worth that. I mean, some of the players who came in at that time were good. Don't get me wrong. There were some great players came in. I'll say that now. I don't want to be getting sued or anything. No, but as a fan, I can say there were some good players. But then again, there were others who were paying inflated prices for. And when the team got relegated, the 5-year plan had come to nothing, and the previous owners, other businesses, he was a property guy, were getting into trouble, and he needed to offload the club pretty damn quick. So he disappeared in a cloud of smoke and handed the club over for £1 to Steve Dale, whose name remains a swear word around these parts.
Like Voldemort.
Absolutely, yeah, very much so.
He whose name should not be named.
The man is absolutely loathed and detested. He was hardly ever at the match, hardly ever at the ground. The irony for me, one of the ironies, the bitter ironies, is that all the time when we knew it was going wrong and players had stopped getting paid their wages, and other staff, people who worked at the social club and within the fabric of the club as well, coaches and domestic staff, that kind of thing, cleaners and all that, weren't getting paid, couldn't put food on the table. All this time, the team was still playing its heart out on the field and playing exceptionally good football, really, really good football, wonderful stuff. The fans were right behind them. We saw a team that scored more goals throughout English football that season than any other club, with the exception of Manchester City.
Wow.
So that was the kind of style of football we were getting used to. Some brilliant, brilliant players. And I think in hindsight, and perhaps at the time, fans of other clubs have criticised us, I think, since then and said, well, if you knew this was all going wrong and players weren't getting paid and you felt strongly about it, as you apparently do, why didn't you boycott it? Why didn't you do what Blackpool fans did when they didn't like the Oyston family being in charge? Why didn't you take a stronger stand? And that's a fair question. Question. For myself, my answer to that was we wanted to get behind the club. We wanted to help them, support them to get promotion, because we thought if the club gets promoted, an alternative buyer would be more likely to happen. We would be a more attractive prospect for somebody to come along to Steve Dale and say, how much do you want? I'll buy this club off you. Cheerio. It didn't happen. But we gambled that. And fair enough, other teams, other clubs have kind of, with a certain degree of bitterness in some respects, have kind of said, well, it's your own fault. You should have boycotted them, blah, blah, blah. No sympathy. That's far from universal. There was a massive outpouring of sympathy from people who love football in general, love the game, and could identify with our plight. We had lots of support from teams far and wide, both within the British Isles, clubs like Brighton, fans from Brighton and Hove Albion, obviously been through loads of torment in the past. Lots of support from places like Huddersfield, Rotherham, Sunderland. Elsewhere, I don't want to leave anyone out. Nearly everyone was represented. People sent flags, people sent money.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing, really. So generally, there's been a lot of sympathy.
Yeah.
And support.
I'm sure the ones that were giving you stick, that's just sort of comes down to typical football machismo, I'm sure.
I think so. I think that's just, you take the rough with the smooth, don't you? And we're used to it, aren't we? As football fans, we're used to it. And I will say this: with a lot of people who are Bury fans, we have a lot of local friendly rivalry with the likes of Rochdale, with the likes of Bolton Wanderers. And I have to say that when times have been hard, the true fans of those clubs have rallied round. Really have. And I don't care who I get a hard time from for saying that. Maybe it's because they'll say to me, it's because you're not from round here. You don't feel it the same way. I do, believe me, I do. But I think there is, as in life, so in football, there is far more that unites us than separates us.
Yeah. I think as well. I mean, even from speaking from myself as an Arsenal fan, I think even at the top, you can see that football is on a slight sort of fragile surface at the moment, and you see as well. You look at Inter Milan and the troubles they're having. A huge club.
Yeah.
Based over in Italy that are
Sure.
struggling at the moment, and it's that my friend was on the show earlier a couple of weeks ago, and he was sort of allaying the cautions and the troubles that they're going through at the moment. And to me, it more or less spells and it forecasts the glass ceiling of football, financial glass ceiling of football starting to break. And it's one of those things in football, that glass ceiling was always there and it was always going to break at some point. And obviously a global pandemic such as this is something to accelerate that. But I think if you look at that from a football fan perspective, even if you are an Inter Milan fan, an Arsenal fan, we're not safe. There's always going to be that level of fragility there. So we all have to I suppose I can sort of understand that football sort of bravado side of things, but at the same time, when we really look at it, you can't take any of these things for granted at all.
You can't. I think the people at the very top of, I mean, throughout football, everywhere in football, it's been such a part of most people's lives for such a long time, for many decades, that I suppose people have become blasé. People throughout football, at the very top particularly, have just kind of, it's always been there. And, well, use a bit of imagination. What did people do before the 1880s? What will they do if things, don't turn out well? If I'm sure, sadly, that some clubs will go to the wall and cease to function, cease to be. We've certainly seen that at grassroots level, at non-league, non-elite level, as they call it. Teams just can't survive without that little bit of income coming in from gate receipts. And it's really hard. It's tough at the top, but it's much tougher at the bottom. And we've got to look after the grassroots, innit? No root, no fruit.
If you're interested in coming on the show for an Under the Floodlights special to talk about your favourite player or manager, please email the triplef2021@gmail.com or DM the triplef84 on Twitter. All contact details will be in the episode description. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.
In terms of what sort of happened with Bury FC, does it help in any way trying to figure out where the sort of culpability, who that lays with, or does it really help in sort of figuring out where to point the finger of blame? Is that something that you think helps at all?
In my opinion, from my own experience, it has helped, and I think it's part of the kind of grieving process, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to find out. You need to find out all about these kind of things, and we've all been through the various stages of like anger and guilt, and then all the stuff that you go through when it's.
Was it a bit like a murder investigation?
It really was. It was. People. A lot of people we talked to on the streets and at the time, and people did try and huddle together for kind of comfort, really, and we're talking about it a lot, and we were gathering in pubs and wherever, shops or whatever, and the cafes and that, just to talk about it all. And you have to go through it. You have to analyse it. And people often did say, "Oh, it's like a bereavement. It's like a death in the family." And I went one further. I said, it's because of the way it's happened. It's actually like a murder. It's like somebody has killed this club. It just didn't die of natural causes. Somebody did this, and we need to acknowledge that. And I think that helped. But I think once you've done that, once you've been through all that and experienced that, which is important, you do have to move on, because otherwise you just wallow forever and ever, and nothing good comes of it. And I have to say that the best way, in my opinion, to honour the wrong that was done to Bury FC is to make something good happen with the Phoenix club that is happening now. And I think that's the best way of honouring that. Some people will disagree. I know that some people who are still in the grieving process, as it were, and will never, as far as they can see now, attach themselves to Bury AFC purely because it's not Bury FC.
Yeah.
And I think partly that's to do with Bury FC still existing as a legal entity, even though it's not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. But also that's people's own personal feelings and people's own personal choices. For me, my choice, and I know it's a choice, I'm lucky, I feel fortunate that I have been able to choose, along with hundreds and others of us, over 1,600 of us who are now signed up members of the new club, have been fortunate to be able to choose to do it the way we're doing it now. And I accept that some people haven't had that luxury. And I'm not going to criticise them for that. That's entirely up to them. And if and when they decide to jump on board, we'll be waiting with open arms. And we'll welcome them. Absolutely.
It's probably still part of the grieving process, though, for those, though, surely.
Yeah. I think partly it's being stuck there as well. And some people need to grieve longer and more deeply than others. Let's face it, we're all different.
Yeah.
And some people's involvement with the club has been much longer than mine ever was. Even though, I was supporting Bury FC for 50 years at least. Some people have been there 60, 70 years, and their parents and their grandparents and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Which mine weren't. So I accept that. And it's not just about that. Anyway, I don't mean to oversimplify it. But I think the best way to honour all that happened, and to, in a way, kind of spit in the face of the people who, with malice aforethought and deliberately, did harm to that club, to come back stronger eventually, or just to come back at all and still be alive and kicking, literally kicking a ball, is one in the eye for them. And I think that's part of our process of healing. Once you pass the grieving, now we're into the healing. And healing is, I've got to tell you, a much, much happier place to be. It's a wonderful place to be. Really, really, it's a virtue. It's its own virtue. It really is. It's its own reward.
Brilliant. That's great to hear, Chris. I'm happy for you for that.
Well, we've a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I mean, you just got to look at Wimbledon for a fantastic example, haven't you?
We've got some great examples, and not a million miles away, on our very pitch, on our old pitch that we can't use at the moment, Big Lane. We were hosts to FC United when they first formed all those years ago, and that was a fan-based, fan-owned club, which Bury AFC is, and that for me is its greatest strength. We are, whatever happens, we had a frustrating first season. We only played 7 matches, but we ended up top of the league. No promotion or anything because the season's null and void. But we saw 7 league matches, a number of friendly matches, a cup tie or 2. We got people in the ground. We saw a team in Bury colours representing football in this borough, and somewhere for us to go and meet old friends and meet up again and talk about the old days and also look forward to perhaps the new days. And yes, it was frustrating. COVID has wrecked a lot of that, but it was just such an achievement to get a team on the pitch after a year of nothing. I mean, zero. I mean, no involvement at all. Many fans just cut off from football in general. I'm not the only one. I've spoken to lots of other people who said, I just can't watch Sky Sports News anymore. I can't watch Match of the Day. It means nothing to me. It's like we fell out of love with football because footballers had fallen out of love with us. Football had kicked us out in the guise of the EFL, and we just thought, well, sod it. You know what I mean? If that's what football thinks, we can do without you as well. So there was like a year of cold turkey, nothing. But then to have this little grain of something, a possibility brought back to us in an organisation that is owned by all of the supporters, to be part of a club, however few games they've played so far, and however many divisions they may be off winning the European Champions League, it's just a few more seasons to add to that, that's all. How realistic was it for us to get to the Premier League in the first place? Come on, we're alive and kicking. We've got a chance. We're in with a shout, and that's what it's all about. We've still got that dream. We've got the dream back. We've built it back again. And we've done it as a collective. We've not done it waiting for a knight in shining armour to turn up full of empty promises, only to sell us down the river 2 or 3 years later. And after all that we've been through, and that painful, painful period of time, and that sense of loss and anguish, and the real sense of hurt and betrayal, why would anyone not want to kind of get on board with the possibility of having something that's more secure, more stable, is done in a progressive, inclusive way, in a realistic way, where we build and grow organically rather than on speculation that could turn out to be fraudulent. After what we've been through, it would be the greatest insult of all, I think, to put ourselves back in a position where we are at the whim of some fraudster, where we have no guarantees again.
Yeah.
What's it all been for? What were the last 2, 3, 4 years? Because we saw it coming. What has all that suffering been for if we don't learn from it and do things differently this time? And this time, I believe we are doing things very, very much differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and making sure that the club remains on the right path. That's, I mean, you couldn't really ask for any more than that. And I think you're doing a wonderful thing. And yeah, it's great.
It feels right. Do you know what I mean? It feels right, and I know that it is right. And I know that the people who are involved in the various committees, there are a number of committees, and they're all volunteers. We've got like the general committee who run the club, the organisation. Then you've got a football committee. Then you've got heritage committee, of which I'm honoured to be part, playing my own small part within that. And all of the different committees are doing great jobs, all for nothing, all for the love of the club and for the love of football in this area. And that's the right way to do it. I know this is the right way to do it. I know that technically and in terms of competence, these are the right people to get involved, and they're doing a good job. But do you know what? Other than the intellectual knowledge of that, is the feeling. You know, it feels right. And sometimes when something feels right, you go with your gut, don't you? You go with your instinct.
His name is a show! His name is a show! We're not John Lewis! His name is a show!
I mean, I've got a couple of sort of negative questions on here, but I want to keep things positive. I want to keep things positive as much as possible, because I think that's the definitely the right way to go with this, and it's obviously the way in which you're going with your sort of drive for Bury and so on. So let's stick with the positivity. Let's ask what your favourite ever players were for Bury and why.
Oh my goodness! Oh, in my lifetime, watching Bury, I would say that the first player who really caught my imagination when I was going as a young teenager in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, was Derek Spence, who's a legend at this club, one of the rare internationally capped players that we had. And at the time when he got his caps for Northern Ireland, it had been many years, many decades since a Bury player had been picked for an international side, and Derek was one of those. And he was a very exciting player to watch, very skillful, a striker, good ball player, quite slight in build, but a good header of the ball, quite slender and kind of, but very quick, good close control and an eye for goal. Just an exciting player in an exciting team, which obviously helped.
Yeah.
But a great player. Just before Derek, I really liked George Jones, and I was fortunate just to see George towards the end of his career. He'd been a giant at the club, a big number 9 centre forward. I think he'd had England under 21 caps in his early days, but not full international. And he was a great player. And both of these gentlemen I've mentioned, I've met later once their playing days were over. And Derek is involved with us on the Heritage Committee and is doing a fantastic job through his contacts with other ex-players, really. Because part of what we're trying to do as well is build support networks for players once they leave the game of football, which is becoming more and more highlighted now, how many problems people get into once they hang the boots up. You know, it can be really quite a difficult time, to say the least. So
just on that.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, Chris.
That's all right. Yep.
What actually happened to the Bury players once that follow up after their expulsion?
Oh well, do you know, a lot of them, most if not all of them, found other clubs pretty quickly. This was a successful team. These were sought after players, and they all pretty quickly found new teams. The manager, Ryan Lowe, who is actually a legend here as well, because he'd been a player manager when we got promoted in 2010 and came back again to this team as manager. Ryan got a job at Plymouth Argyle very, very quickly. And he ended up coming back and signing maybe 3 or 4 of the team. So they went to Plymouth. Let's see now. Nicky Adams, who'd been a skipper on occasions at the team, he went down to Northampton, signed for Northampton. He'd already played for Northampton Town previously, went back to Northampton. And pretty much everyone found clubs, I reckon. And good luck to them. Yeah, good luck to them, because they were let down badly, not getting paid and all things like that.
And are they getting on? I mean, most of them getting on okay at the moment.
As far as I can tell, as far as I've heard, yeah. And I must plead a little bit of ignorance here, because when that happened was coincided with the time when most of us switched off from football. Yeah, 100%. Sure.
That's understandable. Yeah.
It was nice to, you would hear something about, oh, somebody's done quite well at Plymouth. Oh, good for them. Fine.
Yeah.
But it really, my knowledge of football in general kind of plummeted in the 12 months after our expulsion. And
yeah,
I don't think I'm alone in that. I hope I'm not, anyway.
Well, you're also not alone in sort of way that people would definitely not blame you for what you went through. It
was grim. It was grim.
Yeah. Favorite ever Bury goal?
Favorite ever Bury goal? Oh my goodness. Oh, there have been so many. There have, actually. Well, when you've been watching a club for as long as I have, I would say one of the finest ever was one scored by Derek Spence, and it was in a league match against Barnsley. It's a legendary goal. All anyone can ever do who saw it is describe it, because it's in the days when every match wasn't filmed. And it's such a tragedy, because if that had ever been committed to videotape, it would be shown constantly. It wasn't a 40-yard screamer, nothing like that. I think it was it came from a corner, and it was a very intricately worked move all the way from the corner flag to the edge of the 6-yard box, interplay between Derek and one other player, bamboozling about 3 defenders, took it around the goalkeeper and smashed it into the roof of the net. It had to be seen to be believed. It was just amazing, absolutely incredible goal. I've enjoyed lots and lots of other goals as well, and we've had our fair share of 30-yard screamers as well. But that was one of the ones that I think technically and as a spectacle was probably the finest I've ever seen. And I have seen some great goals, long shots, goals that have been scrambled in perhaps, but they've had great significance. Yeah, like the goal at Manchester City, for example. Other things like that. But Derek's goal is the one that sticks out in the mind.
Yeah, and it's a shame that one wasn't recorded and sort of shown on TV, because it sounds
absolutely. But if you can find anyone of my vintage, if anyone else is out there who hasn't met a Bury supporter, go and find one round about my age and ask them about the Derek Spence goal against Barnsley.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody's got a VHS tape of it somewhere in their locker.
Oh no, I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Was written in the days before we had a Phoenix club and we didn't know what was going to happen. It's called Gig Lane. Nothing in life lasts forever. Troubled or treasured, things change. We've been through the bad times together, and now Bury don't play at Gig Lane. Despicable villains conspired to tarnish our past and our name. The Football League stood by and watch them. Now Bury don't play at Gig Lane. I know there's more problems than football. Some countries are shrouded in flames. And as for the hostile environment, well, as an Englishman, I feel ashamed. The country took leave of its senses. It chooses the wrong people to blame. We've helped build our own prison fences, but Bury don't play at Gig Lane. Salford don't play at the Willows. The AJ Bell's just not the same. Bolton said farewell to Burndon, and Bury don't play at Gig Lane. The darkest nights seem to get longer, but we can rebuild once again. Society, kinder and stronger. And Bury may be at Gig Lane.
Thank you so much for listening to the Triple F. If you could please drop a like on our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter, that would be massively appreciated. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.